Going live now. And we are now officially live.
Okay, so to everyone, welcome to our weekly online Dhamma group, where we study together Buddhist texts, and later we will have a Q&A. And today we are again kindly joined by the Venerable Dhamma, who is joining us from the meditation center in Sri Lanka. So if you're interested in mindfulness practice, then please reach out to us. We will continue with the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta commentary by the late Venerable Mahasi Sayadaw. And after 1 hour of reading and discussion, we will move on to a Q&A. Before we begin, we will, as usual, take refuge in the Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha and accept the 5 precepts. That's something we do every week to prepare our minds for studying the Dhamma, and also for as a reminder for the foundation of our practice. So if you're new to taking refuge in the 5 precepts, then you're welcome to recite with us while you're muted, or even if you regularly take them, you are also always welcome to take them. Is there someone in the Discord reading group who would like to lead the recitation today?
I would like to do it, please.
Okay, thank you. I hope you can see the screen, kindly shared by Martin. And if you're ready, you can go ahead.
Yes, I can see it. Thank you. Aham bande tisaranena saha pancha silani yajami. Dudiyampi aham bande tisaranena saha pancha silani yajami. Tatiyampi aham bande tisaranena saha pancha silani yajami.
Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa.
Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa.
Buddhang saranang gacchami.
Buddhan saranang gacchami.
Dhammang saranang gacchami.
Dhamman saranang gacchami.
Sanghang saranang gacchami.
Sangham saranang gacchami.
Dutiyampi buddhang saranang gacchami.
Dutiyampi Buddham saranam gacchami.
Dutiyampi dhammang saranang gacchami.
Dutiyampi Dhamman saranam gacchami.
Dutiyampi sanghang saranang gacchami.
Dutiyampi Sangham saranam gacchami.
Tatiyampi buddhang saranang gacchami.
Tatiyampi Buddham saranam gacchami.
Tatiyampi dhammang saranang gacchami.
Tatiyampi Dhamman saranam gacchami.
Tatiyampi sanghang saranang gacchami.
Tatiyampi Sangham saranam gacchami.
Isaranagamana nititang
Ama bande.
Parnati pata veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami.
Panatipada Veramani Sikkhapadang Samadhiyami.
Adinna dana veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami.
Adina Dana Veramani Sikkhapadang Samadhiyami.
Kamesu micchacara veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami.
Kamisu Michasara Veramani Sikkhapadang Samadhiyami.
Musavada veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami.
Musawada Veramani Sikkhapadang Samadhiyami.
Sura meraya majjapamadatthana veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami.
Sura Miraya Majja Pamadatana Veramani Sikkhapadang Samadhiyami.
Imani pancha sikkhapadani silena sugating yanti. Silena bhoga sampada. Silena nibuting yanti. Tasma silang visodhaye.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Before we start reading, just a few reminders that if you would like to be part of the reading group, then you have to have done at least the at-home course on Discord, and the orientation is that we read about 2 paragraphs each person, and please take your time while reading and take a pause in between each paragraph, so there's time for questions or explanations. And we are continuing with page 169 on the book and 179 of the PDF, with a paragraph that starts with the abandonment of craving. Since the last reader was Lara, next reader would be Martin. Are you able to start, Martin?
Yes. The abandonment of craving occurs in 4 stages. By virtue of attaining the first path, craving that would lead to the lower realms and craving that would cause rebirth for more than 7 fortunate existences, sukhati, of the sensual realm, cannot arise. By virtue of the second path, grosser forms of sensual craving and craving that will cause rebirth more than twice in fortunate existences of the sensual realm are removed. The third path eradicates the subtler forms of craving. By virtue of the fourth path, lust for the realms of form, rupa raga, and formless realms, arupa raga, otherwise called craving for existence, cannot arise. It must be noted that the craving for existence that still persists in non-returners is not accompanied by the wrong view of eternalism, sassata ditti.
Okay, so now we are, just as a recap, we're studying the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta commentary, which is a book written, but not the actual commentary, but the commentary by Mahasi Sayadaw, a book about the first discourse of the Buddha. Discourse is mainly about the Four Noble Truths, and now we're at the point where the Buddha is, where Mahasi Sayadaw is talking about how the Four Noble Truths are comprehended simultaneously. So the abandonment of craving, here he's talking about the 4 stages of enlightenment. So how it works is through the practice of vipassana. By practicing mindfulness, one comes to see clearly the 3 characteristics. Having seen the 3 characteristics, the mind lets go. Or not having once seen them, but seeing them repeatedly, inevitably the mind comes to the conclusion that nothing is worth clinging to, thereby attaining the Four Noble Truths simultaneously, as explained by the Mahasi Sayadaw. Now at that moment, one enters into what is called Magga Jnana, or Sotapatti Magga Jnana, which is a fancy way of saying one takes Nibbana as the object and enters into cessation. Means there's an experience of cessation. It's not something you remember even, but it is the complete cessation of suffering. At that point, one is considered to be a Sotapanna, which is the first stage of enlightenment. What that means is, having attained this experience even once, even for just a short moment, it's enough to abandon craving, as the Mahasi Sayadaw talks about regarding the first path. That's the first path. So what it means is you can never be reborn in hell as an animal, as a ghost, or as a asura, which is kind of like a demon or some kind of non-human being, sort of like a ghost. And furthermore, one is destined to attain the higher paths within the next 7 lifetimes. So basically, one has tasted enough of the goal to make the final complete eradication of craving inevitable within the next 7 lifetimes. When he talks about the 7 fortunate existences, or 7 sugati, that's the human realm, the Deva realms, and the Brahma realm. But then, if you repeat the process, you again apply your mind to practice mindfulness to see more clearly, then there will again come this experience where the mind says, yes, indeed, nothing is worth clinging to, and let's go. And again, there's an experience of cessation. But that's not necessarily the second path that he's talking about here. You're still potentially still a Sotapanna. And what you experience is called Phala Jnana. Phala means the fruit. Phala is the Pali word for fruit. So it's the fruit of the path. It's the same as the path, but it doesn't have yet the power, your wisdom, your knowledge, your acceptance of this truth, or your realization of this truth, the truth of suffering and the cause and the cessation and the path. It's not yet strong enough to be called the second path. But by repeated application, again and again, applying yourself, again and again, experiencing the cessation, eventually you come to the second path, which means you've cut off enough to be considered someone who will only be reborn at most once again. You have very little craving left in one of the fortunate realms, either as a human or a deva. I guess maybe not as a Brahma. But I think as a Brahma, you go to the Suddhavasa. Anyway, the third path, eventually after the second path, again and again and again, you become an anagami, the third path. And having attained the third path, then you're born in what are called the Suddhavasa, the pure abodes, which are Brahma realms. And when you're born in the Brahma realms, you never come back. So you're born as a Brahma, and you'll never be reborn as a human or a deva. This is a non-returner. They have very basic, as he points out, they still have craving for existence. Otherwise, they wouldn't be reborn. But it's a very, very fine sort of craving. And when you reach the fourth path, then there is no rebirth, not as a Brahma, not in the pure abodes or the other abodes, nowhere. This is called an arahata. That's the fourth path. So the fourth path cuts off all craving, but not just craving, it cuts off all delusion as well, and all anger.
Such non-arising of craving amounts to accomplishment of comprehension by way of abandoning. With regard to the noble paths, as they are experienced in oneself, comprehension is accomplished by way of development. Therefore, the commentary says, concerning the three truths of suffering, its cause, and the path, comprehension is accomplished by way of full and right understanding, parinya, by way of abandoning, pahana, and by way of developing, bhavana.
Right, so he's asked the question earlier from last week, how the Four Noble Truths are attained through the actual practice. And so he's going through the stages of knowledge. This word comprehension may seem kind of not very meaningful, but it actually is referring to the third stage of knowledge. So it actually has a very specific meaning, comprehension. Why he keeps using this word comprehension is because it's actually meaningful. It's the name of the third stage of knowledge. So he's just going through them in order, and that's why he's actually being very technical here, talking about how the commentary describes this third stage of knowledge. What it means is after you start to see see the body and the mind and how they work together, you start to see that they are basically not worth clinging to. You start to see the three characteristics for the first time. This is the point where the meditator begins to start to be concerned about their practice, often wondering if their practice is right or correct, or whether they're doing it correctly, because everything is impermanent, unsatisfying, uncontrollable. It's the exact opposite of what you expect. You're looking to make your practice stable, satisfying, and controllable. And when I say this, this should resonate with you. You should think, yeah, well, of course, that's what I want my practice to be. And this is a mistake. When you get to Sammasana, the third stage of knowledge, you start to appreciate that it just doesn't work. You can't make reality stable, satisfying, and controllable. And so mindfulness doesn't actually lead to stability, satisfaction, and control. It leads to flexibility and independence, and the ability to face experiences and be at peace, and have, I guess you could say, a stability of sorts in instability. In other words, being okay with instability and not being triggered by instability. It's a very different state.
As explained above, the Noble Path knowledge, through realizing the truth of cessation, accomplishes the task of comprehending the three remaining truths. Likewise, insight knowledge, by contemplating and knowing the truth of suffering, accomplishes the task of comprehending the three remaining truths as well. I have summarized these in the following mnemonic. When the path sees one truth, it comprehends all four.
When the path of insight, which is developed to contemplate and know the truth of suffering, becomes fully strengthened, the Noble Eightfold Path becomes established and rushes into element of Nibbana, where all sufferings connected with physical and mental conditioned objects, and all sufferings in connection with the mental formations of the knowing mind, cease. With the cessation of craving comes the cessation of suffering, and the path realizes the cessation. Cessation of craving is accompanied by cessation of all sufferings of the aggregates. Therefore, at the moment of establishment of the Noble Path, the objecting of contemplation is not just the cessation of craving, but the cessation of all sufferings of the aggregates. What is taught in the teaching about the cessation of craving must be understood to include the cessation of all sufferings of the mental formations, because only cessation of all sufferings of mental formations constitutes the real Nibbana, the truth of cessation of suffering. Therefore, Nibbana has been defined as the cessation of all mental formations. Thus, establishment of the Noble Path is evident only in the sense of having arrived at the stage where all mind, matter, and mental formations cease to exist and become void.
Yeah, it's correct to say it's the cessation of suffering, but it's also correct to say that it's the cessation of that which is not happiness. Meaning, it's because it's caused not by some kind of aversion to suffering. It's caused by a disinterest. Like the mind no longer is interested in these things because it sees they're not in any way valuable. And so the cessation occurs simply as a result of the mind letting go. Not the mind recoiling, and it's not something you feel some kind of preference for. So it's true that it is less stressful. And so after the experience, there's a sense of great peace as a result, in a sense that a lot of suffering has been done away with. But it's important, I think, to understand that it's not just you don't suffer, or, oh, now I live my life. It's actually the cessation of the things that you used to cling to, that the mind used to seek out. And so when the mind stops that, there's an experience of the cessation of those things. In other words, the cessation of the cessation of adverting. The mind no longer adverts to the eye, the ear, the nose, the tongue, the body, because those things continue. Like the body is still there. Sounds and sights and all those things still arise, but there's no mind there to receive them. The mind doesn't go to the eye door, the ear door, doesn't go to any of the doors. It's just had enough, and it's let go. So it's also correct just to say it's the cessation of experience, cessation of seeing and hearing, and that's why he's explaining it as you could say the cessation of mental formations. In other words, the mind, there's no conceiving, there's no arising of a perception of this or an observation of that, which is why there's no memory of it. You don't come back and say, oh, that was an interesting experience. You come back and say, that I don't know what that was. That was nothing. That was cessation, is really all you can say. But the the point and the reason why it's so profound is because these arisen things that are not happiness are also incessant and stressful. And so the comparison is glaring. A person who has experienced this has no doubt, and this is why Sotapanna is free from all doubt, because they have no doubt that this was peaceful, this was more peaceful, or this was peaceful in a way that arisen things can never be.
Randy, may I please ask a question, if you don't mind? So if one doesn't remember, the experience or what that was, like you mentioned, how the person will know whether or not the person has reached to a certain level of enlightenment? Thank you.
One may not know as a Sotapanna, oh, I'm a Sotapanna, but one will notice the difference. There's what is called patisanka, no. What am I trying to like? Maganyana, Palanyana, Paccavekkhana, sorry. Paccavekkhana is the 16th stage of knowledge. After Palanyana, after experiencing the path and the fruition, then there's the reflection. And this can, practically speaking, it can take place over a period of time. One is first and foremost aware that something happened, that there was the cessation, that there was the act of ceasing, which is the path. One will remember often that one had an experience of impermanent suffering and non-self. One will be able to reflect that that happened and that was the last thing. Then something happened where there was a cessation. And then one will be able to reflect on the difference of the defilements that are gone and the defilements that are still remaining. There will also be an appreciation of the profound peace. So practically speaking, the person will often be in a state of peace and bliss and lightness and just freedom, feeling free in a way that they've never ever felt anything like before. And that can last for hours, days, before the defilements start to creep in, or the remaining defilements start to pile up, and they realize they have to be mindful again. But there will be a distinct difference. So the 5 things that the Paccavekkhana, 1, the path, 2, the fruit, 3, Nibbana. You will be able to reflect on the nature or what happened. Something happened. You may not be able to say what it was, but you'll have a clear perception that that's what happened. Something like these 3 things happened. And 4, the defilements that have been eradicated, and 5, the defilements that are still remaining. Those 5 things are called Paccavekkhana.
Thank you, Brandy.
Sorry for a more explicit answer. The Buddha said, you will be able to know that you have no doubt in the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha, and that you will keep the 5 precepts naturally. But the no doubt is the big one, and a Sotapanna has no doubt. That's the biggest distinction for the Sotapanna. Buddhe aveja pasadena samanagato. Unwavering faith in the Buddha, Dhamme, is in the Parinibbana Sutta, Mahaparinibbana Sutta, the last discourse, or the discourse regarding the Buddha's Parinibbana, where the Buddha gives the mirror of Dhamma that you should know. How you should know. You have a mirror of Dhamma. You can look at yourself like looking in a mirror. And that's that. You have perfect faith in the Buddha, perfect faith in the Dhamma, perfect faith in the Sangha. And 5 precepts. Arya Kanta Sila. Ethics that is dear to the noble ones. Keeping the 5 precepts without wavering, without uncertainty, without the potential to consciously break them.
Zach, you're next.
Insight is also a constituent of the path, because it leads to the cessation of all conditioned suffering. The Noble Path has been given the full title of the Noble Truth of the Path leading to the cessation of suffering. Dukkha Nirodha Gami Ni Patipada Arya Sakam. However, without the path of insight by itself, it cannot attain Nibbana, where all suffering ceases. In accordance with one's perfections, only after one has practiced insight meditation, many times, many hours, many days, many months, with the momentum derived from insight, the Noble Path appears as if it has emerged out of the path of insight itself. It is for this reason that the path of insight is called the preliminary path, the precursor to the Noble Path, which should be regarded as the ultimate goal. Although the path is viewed then as consisting of 2 sections, the precursor and the ultimate goal, its development is brought about as one continuous process of endeavor. Hence, the Vinodani commentary states that the path of insight should be regarded as a basic constituent part of the path leading to cessation. The said 8 path factors are the supramundane noble path with 8 constituent parts. This noble path, together with the mundane path of insight, should be enumerated as the path leading to the end of suffering.
Yeah, if you want to really simplify it, I mean, I've gone over this before, but the path of insight is his translation of vipassana. I mean, he's not speaking English, obviously, but in English, it's often translated as insight. I don't prefer that word because it's a little bit misleading. It's not terrible, but remember, vipassana means seeing clearly. So the path of seeing clearly is not quite the path of insight. So if you want to really simplify it, the path of seeing clearly is just the working up to the point where you finally see clearly, because you see again and again and again until it just resonates with you and you say nothing is worth clinging to. You don't literally say that, but it's a description of how your mind reacts. Mind reacts, nothing is worth clinging to. It's kind of like an extrapolation. And it just hits, it's like it gets to the point where it's just one trivial experience will be enough, and it'll be the last time. Remember that one because it was the last time that you saw the 3 characteristics before cessation, one of the 3 characteristics. But the whole of the vipassana magga, or the vipassana, the path of seeing clearly, or the path of vipassana, is just this strengthening or maturing of this knowledge of the 3 characteristics. Because remember, again, vipassana means seeing clearly what? It literally just means seeing clearly the 3 characteristics. Now, when you go into the theory of it, there are 16 stages of knowledge. 11 of those are the vipassana stages. Well, not quite, but something like that. You can say 11 of them are are there any 11 of them are before the actual experience of cessation. So they're the progressive path or the progressive stages. But that's only really incredibly useful for teachers and for advanced students. I mean, we lead advanced meditators through those stages, but it's not really useful for a new meditator. They're just going to get lost in intellectual thought, and it can be even harmful. You know, we in my tradition, we often try to hide these stages from meditators and not talk to them about them and tell them not to read about them. Not because there's some secret we don't want you to know, but because it's just going to distract you. These are things, this is just really just a simple path, and these are really just very technical descriptions of the landmarks that you meet along the path. But you can't get there by studying, and studying just becomes an impediment because you'll be comparing your practice with it, and with all the defilements still raging in the mind, you're going to be craving for these stages and egotistical if you meet one of the stages. It's just a nightmare, really. You're much better off going in more or less blind and just learning for yourself, getting used to learning through seeing rather than learning through analyzing or intellectualizing. Study will not help you, and it can be a great impediment. It's not quite fair to say it won't help you, but it will make things much slower if you try to go the route of studying it all yourself and figuring out how to apply it without a teacher. You'll be so far distracted that it can just really slow your practice way down. And it really practically does become an impediment. Meditators will be obsessed with the stages and so on.
What is meant here is, although the truth of the path of the Four Noble Truths is a supramundane path, it cannot arise by itself without the preliminary path of insight. Only after developing the path of insight, and when insight knowledge is fully accomplished, the noble path appears. Therefore, the noble path, together with its precursor, which has to be developed as an initial step, is called the path leading to the end of suffering. To summarize, developing the three paths, the basic, preliminary, and noble paths, leads straight to Nibbana.
So again, the actual path is supramundane. What does he mean there? It means the actual path is the very first moment of experiencing Nibbana. And it's called the path because it's singled out as the moment when things change, the moment when the defilements are eradicated. Not until that moment are they eradicated for real. But we don't think of that as the path. When we talk about the path and when people think about the Buddhist path, they're not thinking about that. This is why it can be quite confusing. When people hear this, they think, what is he talking about? That's not the path. The path is all this practice I've been doing, but that's actually the preliminary path. Preliminary is probably not the best word, but Pubbha Bhaga, as we know, as we learned. Pubbha means prior, and Bhaga means part. So the part the part prior to actually letting go of suffering, which makes sense. You know, we think of the letting go of suffering as the destination, and so it's just very technical to say the actual path to get somewhere is that last step you took. When you go to a town, when you cross the boundary into the town, the path is that step. Everything before that is not actually the path. Why? Because who knows, you may go that way and never actually make it to the town. You can't actually say it's the path to that town. So it's just very technical is the point. But practically speaking, the path is all those steps you took up to that last step, that last step wouldn't have been possible without.
Zin, are you able to read?
Yes, I can. I have now dealt adequately with the truth of the path, so I will terminate the discourse here. May all you good people in this audience, by virtue of having given respectful attention to this great discourse on the turning of the wheel of Dhamma, be able to develop the path of insight, otherwise called the preliminary path, together with the noble path, otherwise called the truth of the path, and soon attain the truth of cessation, otherwise called Nibbana, the end of suffering. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
So this was actually all part of the discussion on the fourth noble truth, the truth of the path. Talking about how actually the Four Noble Truths arise as the path, which just makes it, it's just a little bit complicated. If you want to be very technical about how the path works, it's not easy, not cut and dried to say it's just these four things. They actually are complicated because the path is realizing all four of them.
Part 7, delivered on Sunday 10th March 1963. This series of discourses on the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta was disrupted after the last lecture given on the full moon day of November 1962, as I have been visiting other centers. On this full moon day of March, I will resume my discourses on the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta. In part 6, I dealt with the truth of the path. Today I will go on to consider the knowledge that it is the truth, Satcha Jnana, the knowledge that certain duty with regard to this truth has to be performed, Kiccha Jnana, and the knowledge that that duty has been achieved, Katta Jnana.
This is probably the most important, practically speaking, part of this sutta. I think I say most important. I emphasize the importance because, first of all, it's not very well known. But second of all, it's because the Four Noble Truths are not something to be studied intellectually, and they're not actually something to be realized per se. They're not as simple. As I mentioned, it's complicated, and this is one complication. This is the important complication. This is really the essence of the sutta. The essence of the sutta, and the Buddha will say, I don't know if he actually quotes it later on, but the Buddha will say that there are 12 spokes to the wheel of Dhamma. So what that means is each of the Four Noble Truths has 3 parts to it. 4 times 3 is 12. This is why you'll see Dhamma wheels represented with 12 spokes sometimes. There are different kinds of wheels, but the one with 12 spokes is the one that the Buddha talks about here. So the actual Dhammacakka, which the Buddha is talking, Chakka meaning wheel, so the Dhammacakka that the Buddha talks about, Pavattana, setting in motion, is the 12 spokes, the 3 parts of each of the Four Noble Truths, which means each Noble Truth has a truth that it expresses. It expresses a truth. And we've learned about this, of course, and this should be familiar to you if you know anything about the Four Noble Truths. You should know what each of the Four Noble Truths express, and he's going to describe that. He has already, and I think he's going to go over it again here. The second thing that each truth has is a kicca. And I've mentioned this earlier, a duty or a task, something that should be done. Kicca comes from the root kar. It's where the word karma comes from. Kar is the root in regards to doing. Very simple root. When you do something, karomi, I do. Karoti, he does, she does. And itcha comes from a construction where you say what should be done. But it's a simple word really that means task or duty. When you, like a person who goes to see the Buddha and they say, I have to leave, they would say, Kitchang me wati. Kitchang, there is a kitcha, me, of me, ewa, indeed, ati, exists. There exists a task of me, means I have work to do, so I have to go. Kitchang me wati, tasmamaya gantabang. Therefore I have to go. No, that's not what they say. I'm thinking of something else. Kitchang me vati tasmama. Oh no, I'm thinking of something else. The sataha, where a monk, if a monk has to go somewhere, if a monk during the wasa has to go somewhere, you can't just leave as a monk. We're now in the wasa season, the rain season, and we have to stay put for 3 months. But if we have some need to go somewhere, if we have like our parents are sick, or a lay person is sick and they want to hear the Dhamma, and we have to travel far to see them, or there's some business of the Sangha that has to be taken care of, there's several things that we can do. We can make a special exception where we can travel and stay somewhere else overnight, up to 6 nights. But first we have to say, Kitchang me wati, indeed there is this task of me. Anyway, that's what the word kitcha. Kitcha is a task. So in regards to each of the Four Noble Truths, there's a different task. And this is where I said, not to be realized. We're not realizing the Four Noble Truths. That's not the task. Right? That would be the task. If we said you realize the Four Noble Truths, that would be saying each of the Four Noble Truths is to be realized. But that's not what the Buddha says. Each of the Four Noble Truths has a different task. That's the second part. The third part is kata, kata jnana. Kata again comes from the root kar in regards to doing. But kata means done, something that has already been done. So these three are knowledges the Buddha gave rise to. The Buddha came to know after he became the Buddha, after he had accomplished each of the 3 tasks, he was able to say, this is the truth, this is the task, and this task has been done. The third part is to be able to know for yourself the knowledge that the task has been done. And that's important because you can say, yes, I know what the task is, but you haven't become enlightened because you haven't done that task. And we don't really know the tasks per se until you accomplish them. But the Buddha was able, having accomplished them, to know what these tasks were and therefore pass them on to others. And I won't spoil it. If you know what the tasks are, that's fine. It's not hidden knowledge or anything, but he's going to go over each of them, so I'll let the Mahasi Sayadaw explain each of the tasks to be done, because they're different. And it's important because it really changes how you look at the Four Noble Truths. As I said, remember that the task in regards to suffering, which he's going to talk about now, is not to run away from it, not to escape it. As I said, I'll often ask meditators or ask people when I give a talk, what are you supposed to do in regards to suffering? And I'll say, escape it immediately. Everyone will say, escape it, be free from it, get rid of it, cause it to cease, right? But that is not your duty. So what is the duty in regards to suffering? No, we're not going to get into that this week. Next week, you'll learn what the 4 duties are. I mean, you can read about them. They're in the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta, which we read already. So you can go read the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta if you're curious to know. But I think we'll go through them in order. Today, we're just talking about the first part, which is the Satchanyana, the truth that the First Noble Truth has to impart. But it's good if you remember these 3 terms: Satcha, Kitcha, Kata.
Dalawar, is it my turn?
You can go ahead because I have to leave soon.
All right. Knowledge regarding the truth of suffering. Idang dukkhang aryasachanti me bhikkhave pubbe ananusutesu dhammesu chakku upapadi jnanang upapadi panya upapadi vijja upapadi aloko upapadi.
Uddapadi.
This is the Udapadi. Oh my god. Sorry. This is the noble truth of suffering. Monks, concerning things not heard before, there arose in me vision, knowledge, wisdom, penetrative insight, and light.
Has anyone here ever chanted the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta?
I have, Bandi, but I did not understand a lot of the Pali words. But as I grew up almost every week, now I'm learning the definition, the meanings of that.
So do you recognize this immediately?
Yes, Bandi.
Pali?
Yes.
Mm.
Thank you.
It's really worth, if you're ever going to chant something, there's three discourses that are very much worth memorizing or chanting. You don't have to memorize them, but chanting regularly is the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta, the Anattalakkana Sutta, which is the second discourse, and the Aditapariyaya Sutta, which is in some ways the third discourse. I guess it's not technically, but it kind of is. Anyway, it's the third big discourse that the Buddha gave, and it's thematically it fits very well with the first two. So there's actually a translation that on the internet that you can find that has all three of them together, but it's not the translation I'm referring to now. It's the actual Pali. So this is something if you've done regular chanting in Theravada Buddhism, it should be very familiar to you. Idang dukkhang arya satchanti me bhikkhave ube ananusute sudhamme su chakkung udapadi jnanang udapadi panya udapadi vidya udapadi aloko udapadi. If you haven't, it trips you up, like for sure. But if you're interested, this is really worth. This is the sort of thing that, well, the whole sutta is really worth chanting. But he's going to give some details. If I can just briefly go through the Pali in case there's something interesting. Idang dukkhang arya satchang. So the T here at the end is just a quote. That's how you use. There are no quote markers in Pali. So when you want to say idang dukkhang arya satchang, this is the truth of suffering, quote, you put a T on the end. That's what that T is. Idang dukkhang arya satchang. T. Maybe kave pube ananusu. Ananusu sutta means heard. So it was not heard before. Anusutta was not heard. In regards to dhammas that were not heard before, means not heard by him and really not heard by anyone alive in the world at that time. But it's not something he heard from someone else. Even though he had teachers as a bodhisattva, he had not heard these things from others. That's not where it came from. This knowledge arose. Udapadi. Udapadi means arose. What's the present tense? I'm not sure. Udapad. Anyway, doesn't matter. Chakkung, the eye arose. Jnana, these are just actually synonyms. And in a way, remember, he's giving this talk to a group of these ascetics. And in a way, this is just a rhetorical tool. There's no special meaning, I wouldn't think, these words in particular. Chakkung means eye, jnana means knowledge, panya means wisdom, vidya means, it's another way of saying wisdom or knowledge. Or the vi is kind of makes special knowledge kind of thing. And aloka is just light, which is just a way, it's not actual light. He's saying like enlightenment, like your mind just became bright, smart, enlightened. But it's a rhetorical tool. When you repeat yourself in different ways using different words that mean the same thing, it's valuable to impress your point on your audience. And so that's in a way all that he's doing here, describing things in different ways to help sort of flesh out the sense of what he's saying. Because if you just say jnanang udapadi, knowledge, they can say, oh, well, so you thought about it? No, cakkung as well, I saw it. Cakkung means the eye, so you saw with the eye. And it wasn't just knowledge, it was panya, it was wisdom. And vijja is like, vijja, I don't know how, these have kind of nuance to them. No, vijja in modern times is used, like in Thailand, it's used in different ways. But in the Buddhist time, it was more like wisdom. And aloka. Aloka means light. Way of trying to describe the knowledge. Like this wasn't something I thought about. This was like a light, like an epiphany, like a light bulb moment.
So Bishop, should I continue reading? It's 3 minutes left. Or?
Sure, you can continue.
Okay, thank you. This is how knowledge, that is the truth, arises with regard to the truth of suffering. In earlier discourses, I explained the truth of suffering as birth is suffering, etc. I will reiterate a little to make it clearer. The word this in this is the noble truth of suffering refers to various categories of suffering, starting with birth and ending with the aggregates of attachment. Here, the essential item is the aggregates of attachment, which is mostly just learnt from books. There are only a few who understand it as a personal experience, which of course is the main point. I will reiterate this to show how the aggregate of attachment should be understood by personal experience. Whatever becomes prominently at every instant of seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching, or thinking constitutes the aggregates of attachment. The noble ones see in these objects only as dreadful pain and suffering. The ordinary common people view them otherwise. They do not consider them as the embodiment of trouble and suffering, but as pleasant and good. They think it's pleasant to see beautiful sights, to hear what they want to hear, and to listen to sweet, sonorous voices. Likewise, it is pleasant for them to smell fragrant odors, to taste delicious food, and to enjoy delightful sensations of touch. Beings of the sensual plane regard the sensation of touch as the most delightful. It is a delight, too, to indulge in fantasies and daydreams. It would be terrible for them, a great loss, if everything, including their daydreams, were to vanish all at once. As a matter of fact, all that is seen, heard, etc., are the aggregates of attachment, the truth of suffering. Insight meditation is practiced to bring home this truth of suffering by realizing their true dreadful nature of impermanence, etc., due to incessant arising and perishing.
Yeah, that's a great reminder that the Four Noble Truths are actually something that relates to practice, or especially the truth of suffering, most especially relates directly to practice. It's not something you intellectualize or you think about. It's actually something you experience. The only thing I would say is that it doesn't actually play out quite the way he's saying. I mean, he's trying to impress something very powerful, obviously, onto the meditator, but it doesn't have to be unpleasant to practice mindfulness meditation. It sounds like he's saying you're going to feel just awful, and you're going to recoil from things. There is kind of a recoiling, but it's more like a disinterest. You get tired of it. And you don't really get tired of the experiences so much as you get tired of reacting to them. Because remember, the whole problem is the attachment, the aggregates of attachment. If you don't attach to them, it's like seeing a faraway fire. If the fire is far away, you think, oh, wow, if anyone falls into that fire, they're going to get burnt. But you don't think, oh, I might get burnt. Why? Because the fire is too far away. The fire is not, you're not in danger of being burnt by the fire, and you know that. But it doesn't disturb you. These things don't disturb you. They just look like fire, like that wouldn't be fun to jump into. Whereas an ordinary person looks at the fire and says, oh, that would be fun to jump into. That's the difference. It's important to understand meditation doesn't have to be unpleasant. It does have to be uncomfortable. And there's a distinction there. Uncomfortable means it has to challenge your sense of what is happiness. It has to challenge you. And so it has to make you uncomfortable. It doesn't have to be unpleasant. But comfortable meditation, this is how you know that your meditation is probably just samatha meditation, is if it's very comfortable. Or it isn't mature. It only is mature when it starts to be uncomfortable. In other words, starts to challenge you and force you to see that you're causing yourself stress and suffering. If you don't see that, you're either enlightened. If you don't feel like you're causing stress to yourself, you're either enlightened or you're just practicing samatha, or you're not practicing at all. Because samatha will be very comfortable. It's more like casting off dirt or garbage or trash, giving it up when you see that it's trash. And that's that's liberating. The point is that it's liberating. The practice is freeing and liberating and uplifting. So there's often talk about, you'll hear people talk about how meditation has to be unpleasant and suffering, and you have to go through really trauma during the practice. It's not quite true. I mean, meditators often do, but it's not because of the practice. It's because of their defilement. They trigger their defilements. You practice meditation, but then you get angry. Well, that's not practice. That's just your bad habit. You're not practicing in that moment. Or you get greedy, or you get deluded, worried, doubting, and all these things. The hindrances are what cause the suffering, not the practice. Practice can be pleasant. It doesn't have to be pleasant. It can be unpleasant, but it doesn't have to be unpleasant. And the practice itself should be uncomfortable, but not unpleasant. If it's unpleasant, it means you're disliking it and you're not really practicing. I mean, at that moment, you've given in to defilements, which is normal. I mean, obviously, during the practice, you're going to get angry, you're going to dislike things, you're going to like things. But the whole point is to start to see that that's what's causing you suffering. And when you do that, then it's freeing. You discard all the rubbish, all the garbage, all the pollutions in the mind.
Thank you, Bhante. Thank you to all the readers. We've reached the end of the first hour, so we will stop our reading there and we'll move into discussion time. If anybody wants to ask any questions or mention anything about the text, otherwise we will also transition into our Q&A session of our study now. Okay, Bhante, I would like to present you with our first question that we have. What sort of attitude should I have towards this present moment that we call life? Is it an opportunity to learn, grow, become enlightened, and contribute to the world?
What sort of attitude? Well, the best attitude is not all of that. Best attitude is to see it as something to be seen clearly. Plain and simple. The way I've often described it is that it's not really in regards to how you're describing it, but in contrast to how people look at the present moment as a problem to be fixed. So you'll come across a challenge or an event and you'll try to fix it. I mean, maybe it's a good experience, so do you try to fix the fact that it's going to leave? You try to make it not leave, right? You try to mess with it. So we see things as problems to be fixed when everything, including those things we see as problems, are just experiences to be understood. And that's the real paradigm shift I try to impress on I mean, it's not me. The Buddha tried to impress upon people is to understand. And this is what we're going to get into next week, that we've kind of got a cliffhanger here, you know, in the text where we're waiting to hear what is the task of the first noble truth. The task is not to fix suffering, but to understand suffering. And you understand suffering by facing it, by seeing it clearly. And so we have the Buddha's words. If you want to quote, the Buddha said, Adita nanva kameya na patigang ke anagatang. Yadatitang pahinantang apatancha anagatang. Achupanancha yodamang tata vipasati. One should not go back to the past or worry a doubt about the future. What's in the past is gone, and what's in the future hasn't come yet. Rather, one should see what has arisen just now, or in other words, what is present. Should see it clearly. Vipassati. One sees it clearly. Pachupanancha yo dhammang. Whatever Dhamma there is that has arisen. Pachupana. Pati upana, which is just arisen, means is present. One should see it clearly. Tata tata vipassati. All of them. Tata tata means that and that. In regards to that, in regards to that, in regards to all dhammas that arise as they arise, one should see them clearly. But all the things you say are not wrong. When you talk about seeing present as an opportunity to learn, to grow, and so on, contribute to the world, these are all wholesome things, positive things. They're just not the path. And they're not going to lead you where you need to go. So they're useful as kind of what we call the Buddha, what Mahasi Sayadaw was referring to as the basic path. Goodness, wholesomeness, ethical practice, and so on. These are the basic path. But the real path is to see clearly. I mean, the real path that leads to the noble path is the path of seeing clearly. So that's how you should look at present moment, as something to be seen clearly. Pachupana. We often translate Pachupana as present, and that's how it's used in Pali. That's how it was used in the Buddhist time. But it literally means that which has arisen, just arisen. Pati means just. That which has just arisen.
Bhante, here is the next question that we have. Isn't it necessary that meditation has to be unpleasant? We are withdrawing from sensual pleasures, which we are addicted to.
We are not withdrawing from sensual pleasures. I protest. We are learning to see sensual pleasures clearly. Sensual pleasures are a part of the truth of suffering. You are not to withdraw from the truth of suffering. You are to see it clearly. Now, practically speaking, if you want to see clearly, you have to withdraw, but that's not the path. That could be the basic path. Practically speaking, a person who is very much addicted to sensual pleasure is going to suffer on the path. It is going to be unpleasant, but it doesn't have to be. The important point I was trying to make is that the path itself is not causing you displeasure. Your addiction is causing you displeasure. And that's important because otherwise there are people who try to teach that the path is unpleasant. You go through this path and it's a good sign that it's unpleasant. In other words, like there are stages of knowledge that are unpleasant, and that's not true. Each of the stages of knowledge should be uplifting, should be freeing, should be gratifying, should be invigorating, encouraging. It's the hindrances that are the opposite. But yes, practically speaking, it's going to be very unpleasant for many people, but not because they're following the path correctly, because they're not following the path correctly. They're doing it all wrong. And that's normal. It's normal to just do it all wrong. You hit your head against the wall until you realize hitting your head against the wall is causing you suffering. It's not the right way to go. It's not the path of freedom from suffering. It's an important distinction. I mean, I've heard and talked to people who think But this is good that they're going through this displeasure. It's not good. It's absolutely not useful. Okay, it's you could say it's useful because it's useful to show you that it's not useful. But that's not really an accurate statement, right? It's seeing that it's not useful is part of the path. So there's that. But it's not, even that isn't really the path. The path is seeing that it's not worth doing that. But really it's just seeing that the things that you do that to, the things that you crave for, the things that you get upset about, that they're not worth it. And you don't have to feel the displeasure to do that. You don't actually need the displeasure. You just have to see those things as impermanent, unsatisfying, uncontrollable. When you see that, why would you get upset about them? Why would you get attracted to them? That's the path. So no, absolutely not. First of all, no, you're not technically as the path to withdraw from sensual pleasures. One. And two, absolutely meditation itself need not be unpleasant. And it's not the meditation that is unpleasant. It's the defilements that make everything unpleasant.
Bhante, here is the next question. How can we become disinterested in the aggregates like an awakened one?
Well, you see the three characteristics. I mean, that's what I've been talking about. I guess not explicitly clear. You become disinterested because you see that they're not stable, satisfying, and controllable. In other words, they're not worth anything. And you become disinterested. You become disenchanted. Disinterested isn't quite the right word. It's not the word that's used. You become disenchanted. It's like disintoxicated. So you're no longer drunk on them. It's described as drunk because you'd have to be drunk to think that they were. I mean, a drunk person thinks that things that are glaringly obviously stressful and suffering are not that. A drunk person doesn't see the danger. And so that's how we are. We don't see the danger. But when you see the danger, when you pay attention, when you learn, when you study, sensual pleasure and displeasure, when you study these things, you come to see that none of them are worth your while. And so you become disenchanted. I guess you could say disinterested. It's not the word we normally use. But it's kind of accurate because that's a way of describing where the mind lets go, right? Why does it let go? Because in a way it's disinterested. It's got the ultimate level of disinterest. But I think the problem with using the word disinterested is people think they should affect. Affect means they should cultivate this sense of disinterest, and that's not the way of it. Disinterest comes naturally. And it doesn't feel like disinterest so much as it feels like getting tired. It's a sense of realizing the wasted energy that we put into obsessing over things.
Bhante, here is the next question. As a layman, I apply the 8 principles to save money and transfer to Asia. I sleep on the floor, am celibate and minimalist, but I still am passionate about food. How can I remove this hindrance?
Can't. That's the point. This is an example of trying to fix a problem. You have a problem. I'm passionate about food. You want to fix it. You're asking me how you can fix it. You can't. It is not something to be fixed directly. It's not something to be actively fixed. So you saying, how do I fix it, is going about it wrong. It's not going to get fixed that way. It's not going to get fixed ever, as long as you're focused on trying to fix it. If you focus on trying to understand it, you have a chance of fixing it, or of getting it fixed. And this is why I say, do not look at the present moment as problems to be fixed. Look at them as experiences. Look at it as experiences to be understood. So try to understand the experiences surrounding your passion about food. It's honest. I mean, you don't have to lie to yourself and say, yes, I don't like food. I'm going to stop liking food. How can you do that? You like food. You want food. You know, you're craving for food. You're addicted to food. You can't just lie to yourself and say, no, how do I get rid of this? It's like trying to do something you don't want to do. And this is the beauty of the Buddha's teaching, is you don't have to do that. You can't. It doesn't work. The way of the Buddha is to understand, to see clearly. If you, the claim is, if you saw food clearly, you would never ever attach to any type of food. But more than food, because food isn't really the experience. The taste, the thought, the sight, all of these things, the texture, you wouldn't attach to those things if you saw them clearly, because they are what's real. And if you pay attention to them clearly, you wouldn't attach to food, because you would know that the food wasn't the real thing in the first place. There were only those experiences, moment after moment after moment. That's the first part of the answer. The second part, and I guess the only thing I would add, is that it's not something that happens overnight. This is not something that you can just do and be done with. If you do it the way I just described it, just generally speaking, try to understand, you may never get there. And if you do, it's going to be lifetimes away. It could be many lifetimes away. And it's unlikely that you'll get there if you don't have some strong connection to the Buddhasasana, which is why people do rituals to keep themselves grounded in Buddhism. Rituals are not the path. But if you keep reflecting on the Buddha, reminding yourself of the Buddha, making determinations to meet with Buddhism, to always be surrounded by good people, Buddhists, and so on. When you do this, which is done during the chanting, daily chanting, you'll have a better chance of having further opportunity to continue the work. If you really want success, if you want results, you really, practically speaking, need to do intensive practice of this sort. So apply yourself intensively to seeing clearly the experiences in the present moment. And that's why we emphasize meditation courses, why we push people to consider finding a way to do an intensive course. You can come to our center. This is why we're constantly trying to upgrade the facilities. Why are we doing that? Because this is what we believe in, these courses. This is what has to be done. Me talking on YouTube and Discord, you listening and asking questions, this is great, but it's incredibly limited in its value. It's valuable for sure, but it's mostly valuable as an introduction. Nothing will ever beat intensive meditation practice under a teacher. Now, there is some plan to travel next year, so maybe there will be more opportunities to do intensive courses in our group outside of Sri Lanka. For those of you who, for some reason, are not coming to this great country of Sri Lanka, and not just great country, but this great location that we have up on top of a mountain with clean air and water and quiet, and with the Dhamma, where we have rooms where you can practice. teachings you can take.
Bhante, here is the next question that we have. Should one aim to achieve samadhi in meditation? Is it to improve the level of stillness?
Samadhi, as you're referring to it, is one of the 5 faculties. It's not the only faculty, and it's not even the main faculty. Samadhi as the main character is a different usage of the word. The usage is as another word for meditation. But the actual practice is based on mindfulness. Mindfulness is the controlling faculty or the balancing faculty. Of the Bojjhangas, it's the one that is always important, always valuable, always beneficial. Samadhi is only one side of the coin. The other side is one side of the equation. The other side is effort. Samadhi means concentration, and yes, it's important. Focus or concentration, as you say, stillness, is valuable. But the other side is effort. You need both, and so it's only one part of the equation. But as regards to stillness, practically speaking, people ask this question because they crave stillness. They want it, and they're often proud of it when it does come, attached to it and happy about it. They definitely like it. But that liking is a hindrance. And the stillness is not the goal. It's not actually even the path. That stillness is just a byproduct of the practice, and it can be a cause for stagnation because it doesn't help you see impermanence. Put it this way. Do you think stillness is going to help you see the 3 characteristics? Yes, to some extent it will. Because when your mind is still, you can see the ripples, right? You can better see the ripples. So it's not bad or it's not wrong to think that stillness is good, but the stillness itself is not the tool that you use, or it's kind of like the room that you live in. If you have a room a laboratory, let's say, if your laboratory is well equipped, then you can use the tools to see clearly. But just living in a laboratory doesn't let you do experience. You can't say, "Oh, I live in a laboratory. I must be very smart. I must have all this knowledge about the nature of the things that we're studying." That's what stillness is. So be clear that stillness, yes, what you're saying is correct, but it's only part of the equation. So should one aim to achieve samadhi? No, not really. One should aim to achieve sati. And sati will give rise to samadhi. Samadhi will come as a result of sati. I mean, it comes part and parcel, together with sati, together with effort, together with confidence and wisdom. If you want, there is a way where you can emphasize samadhi to start. That's called samatha. Practice samatha first and then vipassana. That's fine. That's a way of doing it. But the important thing is once you have that stillness, you have to then apply it, use it to see clearly. You have to apply it to reality, which should be uncomfortable. Stillness will be very comfortable, but the observation of reality is uncomfortable. It will challenge you. And it will be unpleasant if you don't meet the challenge. You will react and be displeased. But you can always go back to the stillness if you want, as a kind of a rest or a retreat. Stillness won't get you closer to Nibbana, but it's kind of a good rest. Take a break. The real stillness is the stillness of Nibbana. That's the stillness that the Buddha talked about.
Bante, here is the next question. You said withdrawing from sensual pleasures is not the path. Is abstaining from indulgence in sensual pleasures part of the path?
Nope. No, it's not. I mean, okay, I'm being a little bit nitpicky there, but it depends what you mean by indulgence. If by indulgence you mean seeking them out, and that's, I guess, what you mean. Seeking out sensual pleasures. Yes. So if you give up seeking out sensual pleasures, that's part of the path. Because the seeking comes from craving, right? But practically speaking, I mean, actually, technically speaking, that's not true, right? But it's like it comes through the path more than it is the path. So what it means is when you're mindful, at the moment of being mindful, you don't seek anything out. You don't seek to cultivate pleasure. You don't seek to avoid displeasure. So could say part of the path is not seeking out, but indulging literally just means like consuming. And of course not. Of course, that's part of reality. I mean, how could you avoid consuming? Because the word indulging, we use that word to describe something we know we shouldn't consume. You indulge in chocolate. You don't indulge in rice or protein. But you indulge in chocolate and ice cream and all of these things that we know we probably shouldn't have. That's why we use that word, but it still literally means consume. Think, right? Doesn't mean anything. It doesn't mean seek out. But if it does, and that's probably what you're referring to, yes, you stop seeking out, but that's still not the path. The path is mindfulness, and through mindfulness, you stop seeking out. I mean, immediately, as the Mahasi Sayadaw, there's kind of an immediate nibbana, because immediately you stop seeking out just because it's different. You're replacing that moment where you would have sought something out with a moment where you just experience it as it is. That's what mindfulness does. What that does is allows you to see it clearly without bias, without judgment. And that leads to true nibbana, where the mind truly doesn't seek out anything. But it's not, the word indulging isn't correct. And this is important because people think this. They think, yeah, you have to give these things up. Bad of you to want these things. And it's true. It is bad of you. But again, you're looking at it as a problem to be fixed. Stop indulging, stop seeking out, withdraw from. Withdrawing is something you do to fix something. That's not mindful. That's not the Buddhist path. Such sensual pleasures are part of the truth of suffering. I can't emphasize how the importance of that enough. First of all, sensual pleasures are part of the truth of suffering. Sounds weird, right? If you don't know anything about Buddhism, you think that's odd. Aren't they part of the truth of happiness? Sensual pleasures are pleasant. They're not suffering. But what that means is that they aren't actually satisfying. They don't actually bring you happiness. But the important thing here is why I said I have to stress this. Why it's important is not that. Why it's important is that the truth of suffering is to be understood fully. That's the task. So if you are withdrawing from them, if you're avoiding indulging in them, how could you ever understand them? Now, you don't have to specifically understand the pleasurable one, but you have to understand some experiences. And you certainly can't pick and choose. If you're picking and choosing, you're no longer being mindful. Some of the experiences you have will be pleasant, some will be unpleasant. What you're probably alluding to with all these questions is how the Buddha talked about how with the attainment of jhana, one does become secluded from sensuality. But the Buddha uses the word kama, which is not the actual experience. With samatha meditation, you do become secluded even from sensual experiences, but that's not the point. The point is you become secluded from sensual craving. So what you're trying to get at here with what you've heard and probably read and studied, I assume, I mean, only assuming, is that sensual desire prevents you from seeing clearly. And so the first step for many meditators is not to practice the way we do, but it's to seclude yourself, to gain this tranquility, to just to gain a stillness of mind, as the other person said. To do that first. And when you do that, your mind is clear. But that's not the path. That's preparation for the path. The path is where you start to see reality clearly. That stillness will help you. Can help you if you use it correctly. But don't get me wrong, stillness is good. Even segregating oneself from sensual desire is good, but it's not so much about segregating from sensual pleasure as it is the desire. And you do that by focusing your attention on sensuality, on sensual pleasure. Well, pleasure not so well, yes, kind of. Because the jhanas have pleasure in them. Let's put it that way. And to some extent, it is not called sensual pleasure, but it kind of is sensual pleasure because in the beginning, the object is often an object of the sense, like a light, a color. So you might use white as your object. And you focus on white and you just say white, white, white. Eventually, you become so fixed and focused on white and there's pleasure there. Right? So the pleasure isn't the point. The first jhana, the second jhana, the third jhana, well, depending how you enumerate. Anyway, the first few jhanas have pleasure, or can have pleasure. I'm not even sure if they have to have pleasure. A little bit rusty on the Abhidhamma, but it doesn't matter. Pleasure is certainly a part of the jhanas, and the Buddha was emphatic about this. It was one of the things he realized. Let's go right back. If you want a very simple answer, let's go right back to the Bodhisattva, torturing himself, running away from sensual pleasure, making absolutely certain that he would not experience any amount of pleasure. That's what he was doing. Avoid sensual pleasure at all costs. And he realized it was futile, it was useless, it was harmful. He was going to die and not have gained anything. And so he practiced jhana, which had pleasure. Why it's not called sensual pleasure is mainly because it doesn't have sensual desire. There's no desire in that sensuality. I mean, the pleasure isn't really because you like the white color, but you can say it's based on the white color. It's not called sensual pleasure. But practically speaking, it's still pleasurable. The experience is pleasurable. But the difference is you don't like the white. That's samatha. And that's useful as a base, as a preparation for vipassana. It can help you with the practice of vipassana. But the issue is that often people are content with the samatha and prefer it over the discomfort of having to be challenged by facing things that are unstable, unsatisfying, uncontrolled. which is basically all of reality, not this white image that you've created in your mind. But yeah, I think I've answered that more or less.
Bhante, here is the next question that we have. Can you give a step-by-step guide to see things clearly with an example? I sometimes don't understand this concept.
It's not really a concept. It's an experience. And you have to see it for yourself. Can't really give you an example, really. I mean, I kind of could. I'll see what I can do here, but I want to emphasize that if it was familiar to you, it wouldn't lead to enlightenment. The three characteristics should be surprising, should surprise you. They should be unlike anything you've ever experienced before. I may be giving them too much. I mean, I don't want to make them sound exotic or something, because it's quite simple. But it's a challenge. It's not what you want to see. So the example that I would give, I kind of mentioned earlier, I think, or alluded to anyway, is that when you get to the third stage of knowledge, everything becomes unpleasant. I mean, it seems unpleasant. It doesn't become unpleasant. It becomes uncomfortable, and you take that as unpleasant because you don't like it. But the discomfort is, it's unstable. Your practice is unstable. So it looks, yeah, my practice is not stable. One moment, one session it's like this, one session is like that. I just can't seem to get it stable. Right? It's not satisfying. You know, I think I've got it, and then it changes. I don't feel satisfied. I just feel unsatisfied by all my experiences. They'll say it like, they won't say it like that. They'll say, I'm unsatisfied. They won't say unsatisfied, but the way they describe it is that they're unsatisfied with their practice. With this practice, often they blame this practice. Maybe this is the wrong practice because it's unsatisfying. But practice isn't real. You're not experiencing practice. You're experiencing reality. And you know you're doing well when reality looks unsatisfying. That's the challenge, is to be able to face it even when it's not what you want, not what you crave. It's not what you're seeking or looking for. Face mundane reality, no matter how mundane, banal, unsatisfying it is. You're trying to teach yourself that satisfaction is not something you should look for in external experience. And finally, uncontrollable. Boy, my practice is uncontrollable. They won't say it like that, but they'll say, first of all, they'll say, I'm trying to control and it's not working. Or they'll say, I'm trying to control and it's causing me stress and I can't avoid. This is a common one, especially when people know they shouldn't be controlling. They say, I can't stop myself from controlling it. But do you hear yourself when you say, I can't stop myself from controlling it? It means you're not in control. You think I'm controlling it. You're not. If you were in controlling it, you could control your controlling, right? It's not actually control. What you're seeing is the attempt to control, which is the craving, the desire, the need to fix things, is just causing you stress because it's not working and it doesn't work. So that's the example I would give. I gave this talk that I think is a very important talk that I've always referred people to. I think it's, what's that talk called? Experience of Reality or something like that. Is that the title? Some of you know it because I always talk about it. Experience of Reality. If you look that up, I think that's the title on YouTube. But it's a long time ago I gave this talk, but it basically said what I just said now. That meditators often complain about the practice. and they feel like something's wrong with their practice, when in fact that's them seeing the three characteristics. So there's your example. So see clearly, see things clearly. We often miss this fact. Like we think, what does it mean to see clearly? What am I trying to see? You've missed the fact that and we emphasize again and again, it only means to see the three characteristics. That's all we mean. Whenever we say see clearly, this is always and only what we're referring to, is seeing the three characteristics. So that's what it means, and that's my examples for you, explanation of how it plays out on a basic level for a new meditator. The challenge and the discomfort of having to face things that you don't want to face.
Bhante, here is the next question that we have. I have been struggling with lust. Is practicing Asubha meditation not a type of remedy for issues with lust? I find it helps in the moment, but lust seems to keep cropping up.
Yeah. Yeah, it's only a temporary solution, as you're seeing. So again, what it technically all it does is calms the mind. Because lust inflames the mind. Lust makes the mind not calm. So you have this temporary relief, and it's not a relief because the point was never to relieve yourself from something. Per se, the point was to get calm. And so the best way to get calm if you have lots of lust is obviously asubha. For those of you who don't know, asubha, subha means beautiful, asubha means seeing not beautiful. So you start to see the not beautiful nature of the body just by focusing on the parts of the body. You can cut the body up into pieces. I think we went through this in the Visuddhimagga study. Kesa, loma, naka, danta, tajo, so on. Breaking it up into its constituent parts helps you to, again, it's not a cure, but it's a means of finding calm. It's a samatha practice, and that's all samatha is for, is to calm the mind. Once you've calmed the mind, you have to then apply vipassana. Vipassana is the only way. Mindfulness is the only way. When we talk about vipassana, what we mean practically is the practice of mindfulness or sati. So, yes, so there's an answer. No, it's not a remedy, as you've already started to learn. But it's a temporary means of getting to a point where one who has lust can begin to practice mindfulness.
Bhante, here is the next question. How much formal meditation should one do after the intensive course, as a lay person or a monk, for instance?
As much as you can. Practicing day and night, that's the ultimate. There's no upper limit. That's really the simple answer. I mean, I'm not going to give you a satisfying answer because I can't reassure you that if you practice so many hours a day, 1 hour, 2 hours, whatever, that good things are going to happen. But obviously, if you practice one moment, good things are going to happen. Every moment you practice is a good thing happening. There's no question there. So the more the better. Satinchokohang bhikkhave sabatikang vadami. Sabatikang means mindfulness is always beneficial, day and night. There's no real mystery. The more you do, the better. The less you do, the slower it goes.
Bhante, here is the next question. Can you please remind me again, when we say here and now, what is actually there and what is the truth behind this present moment?
There's experiences there. Experiences of 6 senses, seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, feeling, and thinking. And at each of those 6 senses, the 5 aggregates arise. Rupa, Vedana, Sanya, Sankhara, Vijnana. I mean, it's complicated. You can get it's like a fractal in a way. Well, not really. But you can go deeper and deeper in complexity. If you want to get very complicated, it can get very complicated. But simply speaking, it's just experience. The first level of complication is body and mind, nama and rupa, the physical and mental components of it. So each experience has physical and mental. And then you have the 5 aggregates, if you want to go further.
Bhante, here is the next question that we have. There is a fear I have around noting. I feel I'm going to experience so little of reality by staying with the Satipatthanas so often that I won't be happy anymore. This fear has created a lot of aversion around my practice. How can I get past this?
Oh, you just note the fear. There's probably several things you're not noting. Note the fear, you note the craving for happiness, you note the thoughts and the intellectualization about what you're afraid of. All of this is just the bad habits of the mind. Meditation isn't causing you suffering. Your fear is. Your disliking is. Your craving is. Wanting to be happy is never going to make you happy. Pretty simple. You note the fear, you'll feel much better. With the aversion, when you don't want to practice or dislike the idea of practicing, note the aversion as well. Not really the practice that's doing that. This is just your habit, because other people don't have this, right? Not everyone has the same experience that you have. But you're not the only one. I'm not saying to single you out, but to be clear, it's not the practice that's causing this. It's your own neuroses, for lack of a better word. We all have. I'm not, again, picking on you, but we all have what we might call neuroses, means behavior that is neurotic or unhealthy mentally. And it is unhealthy. It's unhealthy to be afraid of anything. It's unhealthy to crave for anything. And that's just the habits that you have in your mind. So you apply them to mindfulness just as you apply them to many things. But it's just habits. And if you face them, if you learn to face them and be mindful of them, you'll have a lot more happiness, a lot more peace, certainly a lot more freedom.
Bhante,
Oh, did I lose? Oh, okay.
no, we were here. Our team was working on organizing the other question.
Got it.
Here's the question, Bhante. I had a realization that all my thoughts/feelings are mine alone and no one can see them, so they are sort of useless. For example, fear is pointless as I'm the only one seeing it. So why make myself suffer?
That's not a question. You're asking yourself that. You're not asking me anything here. So if I were to comment on this, though, this isn't really a question for me, I don't think, not as I see it. But it's an interesting realization, but it's not the whole picture. And there are some feelings that are evident to others, like when you're really angry, people can see that. When you're craving for something, people can often see that. When you're afraid or worried, people can often see that. And often it's contagious, where you're afraid and you make someone else afraid, for example. You're just really, it doesn't really, asking yourself that question doesn't really solve things. This is just kind of the intellectual Dhamma that goes on, and it can be valuable as a basic practice, but it's nothing to do with the path. The path is not that. It's much simpler. The path is just seeing things as they are. It means that seeing that they're not worth clinging to. Not intellectualizing, like, why would I cling to this? You just see that you see for yourself that they're not worth clinging to. It sounds impossible. It sounds crazy to think, what, you can just look at something and see that it's not worth clinging? Don't you have to have a reason? I mean, you have a reason. You could intellectually point out the reason, but you kind of don't have a reason. You don't reason it out. You see it because you see the nature of it. And that's the beauty of it, is that they have the nature of not being worth clinging to. They're just literally not worth it. Quite simple. But it's harder. It's harder than just intellectualizing. It's a common trap. You hear people have these epiphanies, right? Realizations. They're not really realizations as we would describe them. I mean, they are, but they're not meaningful realizations. They're not the sort of realization that is meaningful. So when we talk about realization, we mean actually just seeing clearly, which is why I emphasize this translation of vipassana over the word insight or anything else. Seeing clearly describes it really well. It's a great. I mean, this is the Buddha. This is the word of the Buddha. And it's a great word. Seeing clearly.
Bhante, we've finished all the questions in the first tier for today, and we've also reached the end of the second hour. So we will conclude our session there for today. Thank you, as always, for always giving us your time and your insight into so much of the Dhamma. Thank you, Bhante.
You're most welcome, everyone. This is a great opportunity for me to have the opportunity to share the Dhamma. Great opportunity for all of us to share the Dhamma with each other, share the Dhamma with ourselves, or share the Dhamma amongst ourselves. Dhamma is one of these great things that you can't ever run out of. So if I take the Dhamma and you take the Dhamma, there's still all the Dhamma left over for everyone else as well. There'll always be enough food to eat. Always be enough Dhamma food to eat. And yet, very few are those who actually have the opportunity to eat it. The opportunity to be born in the time of the Buddha Sasana, to be born as a human being, to have the physical capacity to meet with the Dhamma, right? Just to have the internet. Well, we're lucky now. The internet is all set up, and all these dominoes that have to be get our ducks in a row, whatever that means, to actually have this meeting happen is a rare opportunity. So this rare opportunity we have, especially this human life that isn't going to last forever. I would like to express my appreciation to everyone for taking this opportunity to do something valuable and wholesome in support of our own mental development, our own cleansing of the mind, purification of the mind, but also in support of the Buddha Sasana, in support of the Dhamma, in support of the truth. It's just a greatness all around, and if it doesn't bear fruit in this life, for those who are unable to undertake intensive practice and aren't able to gain profound insight into the nature of reality, then it's a seed that has been planted. They said aligning yourself with the Buddha Sasana, finding ways to align yourself with Buddhism has the great added benefit of supporting you to be reborn in a way that allows you to continue to practice, to continue to meet with the Buddha Sasana, whether as a human or as a deva. So, out of appreciation for all of the goodness that has been performed by the people reading the text, by the people organizing this session, by the people listening patiently and thoughtfully and wholeheartedly, by the people asking questions, and just by everybody involved who has taken the time out of their lives to be a part of this experience, or this set of experiences, moment after moment, that are many endowed with wholesomeness of various kinds. Through the power of all of that goodness, I invoke that goodness and all of the goodness that you have performed in this life and in past lives as well. Through the power of all the goodness that I have performed, may it be a benefit for you as well. May you benefit from, may all here and all beings benefit from the goodness that we all have performed. Through the power of that goodness and the power of the Buddha, the power of the Dhamma, the power of the Sangha, may you all be free from pain and suffering, free from danger, free from enmity, free from sickness, free from loss, free from all unfortunate circumstances. May you all live healthy, happy, long lives with the strength to face whatever challenges come your way. May you be dedicated to the practice of the Buddha's teaching in this life, and at the moment of death, continue to practice and go on to a future life that allows you to practice even further continuously, finding greater peace, happiness, and freedom from suffering until you meet with the final emancipation, the freedom from suffering that comes from the path, fruition, nibbana. Amen.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
Sadhu,
Sadhu.
sadhu,
Sadhu, sadhu.
That is